Hey, good morning, everyone. Lance Tarchioni here with you on Ask the Agronomist this morning, live from our Monmouth studios. Apologize, I'm a little bit distracted here. I'm texting with our roving reporter at Heather, who is live from Commodity Classic. That's where all the cool people are this week, and that would be why I'm in Monmouth because I'm not a cool people. So I passed up several opportunities to go. And in all fairness, I everybody says I need to get to Commodity Classic sometime. In all truth, I have never been to a Commodity Classic, and I like San Antonio, so this would have been a good year to go. And I'm not in the cattle business anymore, so I don't have to be worried about leaving anybody at home to take care of Gavin and chores while I'm out goofing around for Bear. But anyway, I guess this time the only thing I can blame it on is just laziness, and I don't really like to travel unless it's absolutely necessary. So there's a ton of people in San Antonio for Commodity Classic, so might be a little bit lighter crowd than normal today because some of our normal viewers are in San Antonio. Heather had actually we had joked about doing if I went to Commodity Classic we could set up to broadcast broadcast live from the show, which that would be cool. But as I already stated, I'm not really that cool, so we did not make the great effort that would have been required to pull that off. But shout out from Heather live from the show. She's actually got up early this morning, which it's kind of a party atmosphere down there in Commodity Classic. Everybody always tells me, "Oh, the trade show is great. No, you'd love it. You'd get so much out of it." I'm like, "Well, I don't like to stay up all night and drink," and I kind of think it's just one of those excuses to get out of town and have a party, and what happens in San Antonio stays in San Antonio, kind of thing. But anyway, they had the DeKalb concert last night, so we always host. Generally, it's a good country act. Randy Hauser was the performer last night. I like Randy Hauser, so if I'd have been there, I would have enjoyed that. So anyway, thanks to you for logging in here this morning. We're going to might be. I hope this is interesting for you today. I hope somebody has some questions about something agronomy related because I'm going to spend most of the next 45 minutes talking about a 3-day long virtual meeting that I attended last week. And that sounds like a big snoozer, I know. And we do a lot of virtual meetings these days, so that's one of the unfortunate, or depending on your perspective, maybe fortunate side effects of the COVID pandemic, when we weren't supposed to have actual meetings because we would all die if we were in the same room together. Everybody started doing virtual meetings. That's actually how we started doing Ask the Agronomist. If I wasn't prohibited from doing actual meetings, I probably would have never started Ask the Agronomist. So I guess I got to give COVID credit for that too. But the reality today is a lot of companies do a lot of virtual meetings because they're easier, because they're cheaper, because they're more efficient for employees. You don't have to travel to get there. You just walk into your office in your house in your underwear, and as long as you keep the camera from your waist up, you're good. And it's just it's just easy. But I miss live meetings. Everything I do virtual, I wish was real. So hey, Merle's got a question already. Thank you, Merle. So we'll get to your question here in a moment. So appreciate my loyal followers that always are good for a question. That's my role at Bear. I'm the guy at every meeting who asks questions. Matter of fact, we had a meeting in St. Louis, actually in person meeting, a couple weeks ago, and I had to skip the first few hours of it because I had another meeting to do. I had a conflict, so I got my other meeting done, got down there as soon as I could, get in the room, end up setting up front because all the back seats are filled. It's like coming to church late. and and was about 5 minutes into the meeting, and I had a question. So I asked the presenter a question, and at a break, another attendee that was there was teasing me about. We wondered when did you get here? They asked me, and because we haven't heard anything out of you all morning, so we knew you weren't here. When did you get here? And I said, about 2 minutes before I asked the first question. So that's my role at our meetings is to ask questions. So anyway, let's get Merle had a question. Potential dangers of planting beans too early, even though the soils are dry and warm. So I'm guessing somewhere. Nobody has told me. Well, I'll take that back. I do know of at least one bean test plot, not a whole plot, just like one pass in what will become a planting date trial. I do know of those beans that have been planted. I would guess somewhere in the state, somebody's got a field planted. So if any of you are aware of any commercial acres of beans that have been planted, shout it out here in the chat this morning. But I mean, there's always somebody wanting to plant some beans, in mid-February just to see what happens. And we had a very good planting window. Was it about a week or 10 days ago in this part of the state? A lot of spring anhydrous went on under very, very good conditions. There was actually still frost in the ground about 10, 12, 14 inches down, but the top foot was dry and dust was flying and looked like we were in a drought, which we sort of are. But I like a spring drought. Now, when a spring drought, gets carried away and turns into a summer drought, that's not good. But I really hope we do not get enough moisture between now and planting to get out of. Just realized my hood's kind of messed up, so I need producer Heather here to tell me my hood's a mess. Anyway, would not be good if we get enough moisture to get caught up on moisture between now and whenever we plant, because that would mean we'll be planting in June, which nobody ever likes. But Merle's question about planting beans too early. So the first thing I like to remind people is I've never seen a planting date trial where February or March beans out yielded April beans. So I think there's a little bit of a misnomer when it comes to planting date and soybeans, that they just keep getting better and better and better and better the earlier you plant them. That's not true. I've never seen a trial. There's probably somebody will probably find one somewhere to prove me wrong, but the preponderance of data in planting date studies would indicate that I'll use the board here since it's behind me. Got to remember to put the screen up, because when you start writing on their screen, they get pissy about that. So not supposed to hold it, just supposed to push it and let it go. All right. So I'm going to try to draw this. So here would be time or date. This would be yield. And so let's say this is Feb, March, April, May. No need to go any further. That's sort of what the planting date yield curve looks like roughly. And let's throw some numbers on this. So let's say these February beans miraculously make 80. These March beans miraculously make 85. You're going to have early April beans that make 90. And then your mid-May beans are, let's say, 75. That's a little bit exaggerated, but it tells the story that typically in most planting date trials, the highest yield you'll achieve with soybeans are planted somewhere in April. I've seen it be late April. I've seen it be early April. Often it will be more mid-April. There is no data to support the fact that there is a benefit to planting soybeans in Illinois before the 1st of April that I have seen. But you can argue that if starting in March gets you done by, say, April 20th, that would be better than starting April 15th and getting done May 10th, according to the data. So the danger to answer Merle's question. So this is one thing that frustrates people about me. Merle asked a good question. We've been talking about his good question for a few minutes now, but I haven't technically answered it yet. So we'll get to the answer. So planting beans too early, they're probably going to yield less than if you planted them in the optimal time. You've got more risk of losing them to a freeze, and you've got more risk of getting a good enough stand that you're not tempted to replant them and you can get good weed control. So, I mean, they almost always make it. There's stories out there of soybeans that were planted in February. Soil was frozen multiple times, frozen to a depth below where the seed is in the soil, frozen for extended periods of time, covered with multiple inches of snow, got wet, refroze, dried, re-wet, refroze. Took 60 days for them to come up, and they still got about a 60% stand. And a 60% stand, if you drop, anything over 100,000, it is a leavable stand. I wouldn't tell you to replant that. Now, the uniformity is not going to be good. And if you listen to Alex Harrell talk, who's the 218 bushel soybean guy from Georgia, he will talk a lot about the importance of uniform emergence in soybeans. Now, you and I, who have no chance in hell of ever raising 218 bushel beans, we don't care as much about that. We just want to make sure we got enough plants. But if you're trying to raise freakishly good beans, you need to have relatively uniform emergence. And when you plant that early, you can kiss uniform emergence goodbye. You're going to have beans struggling out of the ground over about a 3-week spread. And, you're going to have awful plant-to-plant uniformity. You're going to have awful seed spacing because you're going to have skips and gaps and areas of the field where they come up better than others. They're going to be very uneven. They're going to be very, not perfectly distributed. It's not going to be a good stand. But, through the magic that is soybeans, a piss poor stand of soybeans can easily yield 80 or 90 bushel if they're planted early and everything else goes right. So those would be the 3 risks to me of planting quote unquote too early. And the optimum window, I'm going to say is sometime between early April into the first few days of May. I mean, it's not like, May 1 is not a cliff that you fall off of. The difference between May 1st and May 5th is going to be, relatively insignificant usually. By the time you get to the middle of May, you can tell more of a drop off. And as you get into later May and June, then there's obviously a steeper drop off. So you can find, data that shows for each day of delay, how much yield potential you're losing. Dr. Belo, has that data from their trials, and other people have replicated that. So, as planting gets later than, I don't really think it's a super straight line, because I think there's about, I'm going to say there's at least 30 days here on the flat part of the curve. So I think we got about 30 days to get our bean crop planted in a window that I would call is the peak planting window for soybeans. Corn's about the same, 30 days. Now it's shifted about 2 weeks later than soybeans, But we got about a 30-day soybean planting window and about a 30-day corn planting window to be in what I would consider to be optimal conditions. But you could have absolutely planted soybeans in perfect soil conditions if you ignore the calendar, if you ignore the soil temperature, if you ignore the weather forecast, if you ignore everything but the soil conditions. You could have planted soybeans in absolutely perfect soil conditions 10 days ago. And we probably had a 5-day stretch that was pretty good. So somewhere out there is somebody that couldn't help themselves and put some beans in the ground. And we are, I'll add another risk of early planting. This on the corn side. Um, you know, uh, for a lot of seed companies this year, the biggest risk a grower would face, planting their corn too early is if you have to replant, heaven forbid, you may end up replanting something that you've never heard of before or something that you haven't planted for 5 years. Because the inventory of seed on the good stuff this year is super, super, super tight. So if you squander what you got the first time, a lot of seed companies offer free replant. We do as well. Insurance policies will pay you to replant. There's people out there that act like they're making good money replanting. Be careful with that attitude this year in corn because you're going to get one shot to do it right with the hybrids that you ordered. Hopefully you got what you ordered. Apologize to those of you who didn't, but so that'd be not quite as much of an issue with soybeans, but some of the better beans are in tight supply as well. So got better second options there probably than we do on the corn side. But anyway, that's another watch out. So back to my boring 3-day virtual meeting. So this is a meeting called Ag Tech. It's an internal Bayer meeting. So these are, we're somewhat preaching to the choir because this is an opportunity for the technical community within Bayer, which, believe it or not, I'm a member of the technical community in Bayer. We've got lots of different levels of technical community. So this would be kind of like the field technical community. So all of our technical agronomists, all of our field agronomists, people that are out in the field doing research, people that you would interact with as a grower or a dealer on a frequent basis. So like Rachel Willis that's been on here before, Jim Donnelly, myself, Chris Callall when he was here. Those are the kind of folks that I'm. Seth Tolley, some of you know Seth. Seth is a product agronomy specialist now. I think is the acronym. A PAS, not to be confused with a POS, is what Seth does for us now. So those folks. So I'm just dropping a few names there, so you might know who I'm talking about. And then who is presenting to us would be, people within breeding, people within technology development, people within R&D, people from a regulatory agency, people from our government affairs group, different content experts that are giving us an update on, new products in development, new products in discovery, new products that are nearing commercialization. So, we talked about things that you've heard of, like, Conventro and Viconic. We talked about things that you've never heard of, like Icafolin and F735 and, stuff that has, maybe some scientific names or maybe a product name. Well, not a product name, but it doesn't have a commercial trade name yet. So, for years and years and years, what's now Viconic, we referred to as Ht4, which HT stands for herbicide tolerance, and 4 was the 4th generation of herbicide tolerant products. We got an update on HT5 and HT6, at AgTech. So we get a little peek behind the curtain on things that are coming down the pipeline. things that are pretty near term. So Viconic would be very near term. We're hoping to launch Viconic in 2027, and yet to be absolutely certain that we will be enabled to do that, but looks promising at this point. If we have a Viconic launch in 2027, we will probably get clearance to sell those products about a year from now. So we do not anticipate having clearance in the 2026 growing season. So our seed production group that's going to be growing Viconic beans this summer to enable us to sell them in 2027, if that comes to fruition, is going to have to hang on to those beans and not let any of those go to the elevator until we get all those export approvals that we're waiting on. But our anticipation is first quarter of 2027, which technically the first quarter of 2027 ends at the end of March, right? If I'm doing my math right. So some of you will be planting beans next year, probably before Viconic is approved. So our 2027 launch is going to be somewhat limited just because of the timeline and because of the uncertainty, but that is still our goal. And then the 28 planting will obviously be a lot more significant from an acre volume standpoint. So just to kind of share a few things with you that I thought you might find hopefully just a little bit interesting. We always have personal development time and time to talk about what's your career goals, and my career goal is to just keep doing this as long as they'll let me. I'm not a ladder climber myself. I'm not afraid of heights, but I'm about as far up the ladder as I want to get. Because the further you go up the ladder, the further you get from real people like you all, and I want to stay amidst my people, and so I love the role that I have. I do like that we have a thing here at Bear that's called growing in or growing within role or grow within role or something like that. But basically, it means you can keep learning new things and you can keep having influence in other areas from within the role you have. That's what I like to do. I stick my nose in all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of important people here at Bear that get tired of talking to Lance because I always think I have something that they apparently don't understand, or they'd be doing it the way I want to do it. So I feel like compelled to tell them that. And most of them are nice enough to act like they appreciate my feedback. So that's always nice. But we talked about something we call Eli, which Eli is an acronym for our internal AI. It's an agronomy AI tool. And they're not, there were some agronomists out here that thought, we're getting replaced by a smart thinking computer. But that's not really the intent of it. But it is a tool for if you're out on the road and you got your iPad with you and you want to look up something. We can't really use the commercially available AI tools that are out there. I mean, there's a ton of information out there, and places like, and I don't use any of these, but I know the name. So like, what is it? Chat GPT, I think it's called. There's other ones out there. I mean, we got, kid, I'd hate to be a teacher these days trying to figure out did the kid write this paper or did some AI technology write this paper? And there's lots of ways to get things done these days that I'm not sure you're learning anything, but you are getting things done. But anyway, we can't really just give all of our internal proprietary data and information on products to a public site like that, because there's things that we need to keep secret from our competitors, and all the companies struggle with that. So So we develop these internal tools so that we have access to tools like that are safe for us to put all of our information in, so that it's not easy for a competitor to get stuff that we don't really want them to have. So we had an update on that. I've been a slow adopter to that technology. I will admit, it has gotten better. And if you're familiar with those with those type of platforms, they talk about you need to train them. So you have, the computer's kind of like a kid, doesn't know anything when it starts, and then over time, it learns and soaks up and absorbs information. I think there's an episode of Star Trek where where something that was built to absorb information, kind of became somewhat of a god and was, controlling the universe because it had amassed so much power and so much knowledge. And then there's a pretty popular movie series with Arnold Schwarzenegger called Terminator that is kind of along those same lines. So I like to point things like that out when people get excited about this, because we're making machines that can learn. Yeah, they made a movie about that. It did not end well. So watch what you're doing there, smart people. So then we got the second day, we got into what's the meat of the meat and potatoes part of the meeting, which is my favorite part. So we had a really cool update from a really smart guy in our breeding and R&D group on genome editing. So you've probably heard about gene editing. Gene editing is kind of it's a relatively new science. Not as new in the human health field as it is in plant breeding, but basically, we have the technology today to turn on, turn off, change the configuration of the genes that are in the DNA of an organism already. So biotechnology is introducing DNA into a plant that came from a different species. So that's what makes people kind of hinky about biotech, because they're just, DNA is DNA. It's all kind of the same stuff, but there's DNA in this that doesn't exist in that. And you can, if you know what you're doing, you can take a little bit of DNA from this and put it in that and make this do something that it didn't used to be able to do, such as make a particular protein that kills an insect, or make a particular protein that makes that plant resistant to a herbicide. That ability did not exist in the genome of that plant naturally. Well, what gene editing is, it allows you to, do things with the genes that are in the plant already that you can't really accomplish through traditional breeding. Or if you tried to accomplish it through traditional breeding, you would just have to do it millions and millions and millions and millions of times, waiting for the right random miracle to give you what you were trying to get. Versus with gene editing, if you know what you want, you can, within certain parameters, you can make that happen. So it does give us the ability to truly, and we've talked about this before, our breeding program has gone from, selecting the best product to, we now have technology that allows us to design a better product. And so if we know what you want as a customer, it's going to make it a little easier for the seed industry to create what you want. Maybe you want a hybrid that has, super high yield, really good roots, really good grain quality, and is nearly immune to tar spot and southern rust. Kind of thinking about last year. You might never get that through traditional breeding, or you might get 3 out of the 5 things you want, or 4 out of the 5 things you want, or 4.5 out of the 5 things you want. But with this gene editing technology, it's going to be easier to get 5 out of 5 of the things that you want. And so that's some pretty exciting stuff. And it'll be a few years before the first corn hybrid that is a product of that comes out, but it's pretty close. We're probably a year or two away from the first products that are have some gene editing in their background in the development of the inbreds that turned into the hybrid that you like, hit the market. We had an R&D update. So Tom Eichhoff, who's been a past guest here on Ask the Agronomist and a past manager of the Learning Center here at Monmouth, good friend of mine, great dude. Shout out to Tom. He has transitioned out of the role that he's been in with climate for several years, and he's now heading up our new R&D organization. Kind of in the field for Bayer. So congratulations to Tom, and feel really good about whatever role Tom is in. We talked about a new program that's going to be offered to our dealers through FieldView, which is called FieldView Advisor. And this is just we continue to try to put a little more science and a little less art into recommending hybrids. And so this is a tool available through FieldView that will help dealers position hybrids. It will help with record keeping and tracking, and it's just kind of a handy resource to help fine tune product recommendations on the farm. Going to continue to offer different scripting tools if you want to do. Most of us have a variable rate planter that we've really never used to its capabilities. Some of you are. But I think the statistics on like the percent of acres in the Corn Belt being planted with a hybrid or with a planter that's capable of variable rate seeding is approaching 90%. But I would guess, I don't know, less than 20% for sure of corn acres are getting planted, using a script. So a lot of us. Those are all made up statistics, by the way. So I could be. I heard a funny joke one time about 83% of statistics are made up on the spot, and that example was made up on the spot. That was the funny part of the joke, but it's probably close to reality. So we had we had a session where we're talking about our new. Every company wants to have the best farmer experience. And when a company talks about farmer experience, that's like, well, what is your experience like? How do you feel when you're doing business with a company? And I don't know if there's anybody, Harley Davidson and John Deere are probably the best out there at creating a farmer experience. And those of us in the seed business and Bayer, we're a little envious of, we want our farmer customers to feel about being a customer of Bayer like the Harley guy feels about being a customer of Harley. That's aspirational. I don't think anybody's ever going to reach Harley Davidson when it comes to, their customer experience and how you feel as I'm not a Harley guy myself. I've got an off-breed street bike that doesn't look too bad, doesn't sound too bad, performs pretty good, but it ain't a Harley. And there's just something different about Harley. So we talked about our farmer experience. Had a really interesting presentation from our seed innovation group, which they are focused on research that pertains not to our farmer customer, not really even to me particularly, but to our production group. So new ways of raising seed, new ways of raising higher quality seed, new ways of raising higher yielding seed, all designed around. And this will be a little bit painful for some of you to hear because we're struggling through a tough supply year this year, but all aimed at being a reliable supplier of high quality seed products for you to plant that are hopefully easy for us to grow. Because things that are hard for us to grow, hard to grow means expensive to grow. And hard to grow also means, frequently we have surprises, which prevents us from being a reliable supplier. So We would like to not have any hard to produce inbreds in our stable. And we would like to not have hard to produce hybrids in our stable, because hard to produce inbreds and hard to produce hybrids make a company an unreliable supplier, because you plan to have 100,000 units of something to sell. A couple things go wrong, all of a sudden you've got 20,000 units of something to sell, and then you got 80,000 units worth of demand that is irritated that they can't get what they want. And that's not any place that any company would like to be. So these guys are working with it's pretty cool. We've talked about this before, and you might be aware of this if you're around much seed production, but we're actually doing, I can't remember what the percentage is, but a significant amount of our production is in corn is direct harvest. And that means you harvest it with a combine, you don't pick it on the ear. And there's lots of benefits to that. You actually get higher quality seed. There's less waste doing that. It's more efficient, but there's challenges with it too, and it gets a lot better. So ear harvesting when the corn gets too dry is terribly wasteful. You get a lot of ear shelling. You get a lot of kernel loss. Your quality's not as good. And you really need to get that product out of the field as timely as you can, because letting it set out in the field is not great for the germ and the quality of the seed. So harvesting it too wet is not good for quality. Harvesting it too late is not good for quality. One of the biggest issues with direct harvest is every seed plant in the country was designed for ear harvest, because that's the way it's traditionally been done. Little bit of trivia here for you. I believe the U.S. and there's one other country, maybe I can't remember where, are like the only places in the world where seed corn is harvested on the ear. In most other countries where seed corn is being produced commercially, it is direct harvested with a combine. So we make some special modifications to the combine to be a little more gentle, and we have a tighter harvest moisture window. So we'll never get to the point, most likely, where we would do all production direct harvest, because you can't harvest 35% corn through a combine and get good quality. You have to let it get drier, and we need to get started earlier, or we'll never get done in a timely basis. So we gotta continue the ear harvest, on the high moisture stuff, and then as moisture comes down, you can go with the direct harvest route. We would also need to invest in infrastructure at all of our plants to enable them to handle a higher volume of corn that comes in a grain truck, as opposed to on the ear. So let's see. And then the third day. So if you're thinking oh my God, how did you survive a 3-day virtual meeting sitting in your office looking at a screen? Well, in fairness, if you add up the total time, it was about 15 hours worth of screen time spread out over those 3 days. They gave us lots of breaks. They didn't start too early. They didn't go too late. So it was not terribly painful. You could get some other stuff done in your day, and that's the beauty of virtual. And I will admit it's a very efficient way to share information. Nobody had to buy a hotel. Nobody had to fly. Nobody had to drive. I'm pretty close to St. Louis. So I'm a little bit spoiled. I could be to an in-person meeting in St. Louis in 3.5 hours. But a lot of my colleagues are spending a day of travel that involves a plane or multiple planes to get to a meeting in St. Louis. So I get it. There's good things about virtual meetings. I would still rather be there in person. So the last day was kind of a crop protection day, and so one of the cool things, and I talk about this a lot, one of the cool things about being with Bayer now versus my old Monsanto life is we have a very robust herbicide, not just herbicide, but pesticide discovery program. Monsanto had not been in basic, molecular molecule discovery for, I don't know, decades. We developed a lot of really good formulation technology and made a lot of really good improvements on products that we already had, but we were not discovering new molecules anymore. There's very few people in that business today. You can probably count them on one hand. It's a very expensive business to be in. But the technology that's being used to, it's a little bit like the gene editing that's going on in breeding. There's ways you can look at a molecule, but before you even synthesize it, before you've ever tested it, before you've done anything with it, and identify, okay, this is going to be a really toxic thing. It's going to be bad for the environment. It's going to be bad for humans. It's going to be bad for fish. It's going to be bad. It's just, not the kind of stuff that is A, it's not going to get approved, and B, not the kind of stuff the Bayer wants to be associated. We would like to have products that are, and I know there's some people out there that say there is no such thing as a safe pesticide. We'll put that argument aside and have that another day. But there are things that can make products safer, and we have a lot of knowledge and understanding around, okay, what kind of molecules are going to be safe. So you can screen out a whole lot of stuff that you don't even need to look at it, because you just know, looking at the molecular structure, that's going to be a baddie. We don't want that. And so they're doing a lot of really cool stuff too, because it's always been looking for a needle in a haystack. And through some of these technology advancements, the haystack's getting smaller, and there's a lot more needles in it, so it's easier to find one. And that was pretty cool. Then we got an update on Ep4, which that's one of the fancy names. That's a brand new molecule. For a short time, we thought it was going to be a brand new mode of action. It's actually not. It's in a group. Oh shoot! I didn't bring my notes for the meeting with me. It's in a group I've never even heard of before. There's nothing in that group being sold today, but it was, it ended up being classified in a group that had been, previously named and identified from somewhere. But it's a very unique product, works in very unique ways. It's going to require a lot of training because it doesn't look like it's killing anything. It's extremely effective, very exciting product, but it doesn't work like any herbicide you've ever seen before. And it was kind of interesting to look at some of the pictures and look at some of the data that we're getting out of it. We're gonna have to kind of, do a lot of education, a lot of training around, okay, here's what to expect. Here's what it's doing. Here's what you're going to see here, because you really can't tell very easily that the weed is dead for a long time. And so that's going to kind of freak people out, but it's highly, highly, highly effective, and very, very, very exciting new product that'll be probably coming out early-ish next decade. And when you put a year on something, that's a pretty specific data point. When you start talking in terms of early, mid, late decade, that gives you a lot of wiggle room there, because technically, until you get to the middle of the decade, you're kind of still in the early part of the decade. So, early decade could be 31, 32, 33, maybe if things go badly, 34, 35, until we get to 36, we technically didn't, well, at least until we get to 35, we technically didn't lie when we said early decade. So you get smarter about this stuff, and you learn not to over promise when new products are going to get out. Because we actually had the last presentation we had was kind of scary cool. We actually had a chance to talk with a director of the EPA, which is which is pretty uncommon for lowlings like us to get to talk to a director from EPA. And I think a lot of times farmers, kind of have an adversarial view of the EPA. Oh, they're trying to take my stuff away from me. They're trying to prevent me from doing this. They're trying to prevent me from doing that. I want to do things the way I want to. I think sometimes the registrants would be the companies that are registering products through EPA. I think people assume that we also have a combative relationship with EPA, and we can at times, but more often we're partnering with EPA to try to get products approved. Now they got things they got to do because they've got other stakeholders they have to answer to, and they can't just do what the farmer wants. They can't just do what Bayer wants. They can't just do what Congress wants. They can't, they can't really do what anybody wants. They're trying to please, how's that saying go? You can't please two masters. Well, the job of the EPA is to please about 10 masters. And that's what makes their job so difficult, is what makes their job so expensive, and what makes their job take so darn long. So it was kind of interesting to, it's a big bureaucracy. One interesting thing we did learn was they were not they didn't stop through the government shutdown. They actually had some money, and their budget wasn't empty during the government shutdown. So they were able to work. It was kind of funny. He said some of his people, he's got a lot of people that report to him, and his division, they kept asking, are we still working? We still working? Are we going to be in tomorrow? Are we working next week? He says, just keep coming to work until I tell you different. So they worked all the way through the shutdown, which was nice to hear. We had we got a picture of the broadacre herbicide pipeline, which things even back further than icafolin and other things we're working on, like HT5 and HT6, corn and soybeans. So there's more generations of new products coming. We had a nice update on new fungicide products that we're developing. There's a really, really good new triazole chemistry that will become a part of Delaro Complete in the relatively near-ish future, that looks like it has really, really good crop safety on soybeans. So the DAPL effect that we sometimes see from high rates of triazoles in Delaro and Delaro Complete, should take care of that, which will enable better products to be used in the South. That DAPL effect occurs when it's really hot. So if you're spraying fungicide on soybeans in the Delta and the South, even Southern Illinois, you're probably not using Delaro or Delaro Complete. As you move north, those become really, really good soybean fungicides, just because you're not going to see that DAPL effect when it's super hot. That's caused by the high rate of triazole chemistry that is in Delaro and Delaro Complete, which is one of the key things that makes it such a great fungicide. But it makes it, a better corn fungicide in some cases. So 735 is the new number given to the new chemistry, the new fungicide that we're working with in development. Efficacy looks really good. It was lights out on southern rust and tar spot last year. So really, it's going to not only improve the crop safety of Delaro and Delaro Complete, it will also improve the efficacy of Delaro and Delaro Complete, which in my humble opinion is already the best there is. So that's good to hear. We talked about Viconic, which we've talked a lot about Viconic on here before. You guys know about Viconic. That's our 5-way stacked soybean that we will hopefully be offering in 2027, and that's going to give you resistance to dicamba, 2,4-D, glufosinate, which is Liberty, glyphosate, which is Roundup, mesotrione, which is Callisto. There's chemistry products that have to be developed with that. That's the other thing that we've got going through the process too. But before we can sell Viconic, we got to get the export approvals on the grain. We also have to get the herbicides registered that go with the soybean trait system. So we won't have them all approved, for 27. There's going to be continuing new products developed, new premixes, different ratios of products, lots of things that will not be done for 27. But we want to have our 2,4-D product. We want to have a mesotrione product. We want to have products specifically labeled for use on Viconic soybeans, because there's been precedent set before when we sell something to you that is resistant to a herbicide or an active ingredient, and there is no registered active ingredient for that crop, but there are unregistered products that have that same active ingredient in them. Some people, not saying you, but some people feel tempted to, make an off-label application. You shouldn't feel tempted to do that, and we can't really be liable for enabling you to do that. So for that reason, we need the chemistry to go with the trait to avoid, any appearance of impropriety there, as I think the legal term would say. So, and as I mentioned, we wrapped up with the regulatory update, which is, for me, politics and that regulatory environment it's frustrating and fascinating at the same time. And we got a cool group of really, really, really interesting people to talk to. That that's their life is focused in that space. And they either live in DC or travel to DC a lot, and they talk to the people that you see on CNN. And it's a crazy world there. Speaking of crazy world, did you I was going to tell a joke at the start of Ask the Agronomist that we were going to do a recap on the State of Union address here today, just to cause some heart attacks in our HR department and get my boss Sean Evans' blood pressure going this morning. I think there's probably a lot of you that would agree with my assessment of the State of the Union address. But we're not going to go there today because that's not a Bear sanctioned conversation. So call me later if you want to talk about State of the Union address. But anyway, I am at the end of my agenda here for today. So Merle, thanks for the question on soybean planting dates. If anybody else has been saving a question, I'll ramble here for a few minutes and give you time to ask your question. We will be back with you 2 weeks from today, which is what? I don't know for sure. I should always look this up. So what would that be? Probably March 12th would be our next episode. And who knows? Could be people planting soybeans then. We had about a strong inch, maybe closer to 2 in places of snow overnight here in Western Illinois. So when that melts later today and tomorrow, we will have the appearance of having a little moisture in the soil, but won't last long. Are we still supposed to be 65 tomorrow? I'm gonna look that up here. Let's see, 66 it says now. So I hope that happens. I mentioned that I'm not a Harley owner, but I do have a street bike, and it's in the shop in Pekin, and it's done, and they're ready for me to get it out of there. And I'm thinking Friday afternoon, I'm going to get somebody to give me a ride to Pekin, and I'm just going to drive the girl back home. So it'll be a nice day on Friday with a high of 66. Supposed to get up 52 today, so that sounds pretty nice. And then we're kind of back to some more seasonal stuff. And then, oh, good grief, we got this looks a little funky. So next Friday, my forecast has a 55% chance of snow, according to this app. 55% chance of snow, because it's got a snow flurry there, not rain showers, on a day with a low of 50 and a high of 67. the good Lord's going to have to be involved with making it snow on that day. So I'm not sure how that's going to happen. But it looks like a more active weather pattern, and that's what some of the weather forecasters have actually been predicting in the long range forecast, that we will turn wetter here before traditional planting season, and we could end up, with some delayed planting this year because of a wet-ish spring. Now, doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be a good year, but it might be one of those years, unlike last year, when you can't just do anything you want any day you want. But we could certainly use some moisture. Just hopefully doesn't come in a way that keeps us out of planting for 60 days or anything awful like that. So stay safe. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks. Appreciate your questions. Appreciate you logging in, and everybody take care.